To go. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of our 3-part series of Zero Talks with Better Rhodes. I'm your host, Kayla Winter. We went into a lot of the background for our guests in episode 1. If you missed it, go back and listen. It was a great conversation on distribution and sales logistics. Today, we're going to dive into the category a little bit deeper, talk about consumer insights and category trends and evolution. So I'm here with Daniel Stiller and Taylor Foxman of Better Rhodes.
Hello again.
Kayla, again, thank you for having us.
Oh, of course. Thanks for being here. We're really excited to talk to you guys. It's great to get a perspective of, what you guys are doing, which is very different than a lot of the producers and consumers that we talk with. This is really, you guys are making it happen. You are the link between our producers and the consumer, and you understand, how that conversation and the relationship goes. So this is great. So I'd like to start off with just diving into a little bit more about consumer education and kind of what we need to be as an industry teaching consumers so that they can better understand, appreciate these beverages that we're making, and essentially make it a little bit more approachable to the consumer.
Yeah, it's that approachable aspect I think is so important, and it really is education based. So even like the simple things, and we catch ourselves doing this all the time by alcohol free, non-alcoholic. When do we use the terms? What are the definitions around the terms? What does it imply? And I had a interaction with a customer, and I used the term alcohol free, but to them, the product wasn't alcohol free. It was a non-alcoholic product, and to them, they were sober, and that was a really, really important distinction. And they called me out on it. And it was absolutely fair. I absolutely used the wrong term. Mm-hmm. But it's something that I think we have to, as a whole, get better at when we're using those terms and where they fit in. And that's just one aspect from the education perspective. I think going back to episode 1, there's also a lot of education for consumers to just understand how much great product is out there. Like, there's so much great product that's out there. They only get very little exposure to it because retailers aren't stocking it, or their first interaction with a non-alc product was kind of as we talk about internally, it was like the penalty box. You had to drink it because that was, it wasn't a choice for you. It was something that you had to do. So, and I think the product was reflective of that. It wasn't trying to appeal to people who were choosing and willing to make a health and wellness choice and willing to spend the money on it.
First generation, like the older products you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Those first gen. If you experienced that, and that was your take on the industry and how good the industry was, well, now you have to look at us again. You definitely have to look at us again. It's evolved. It's so much more creative. It's not just analog versions of alcohol products that are out there. It's completely new directions, people trying different things. It's, in many ways, it's far more innovative than the alcohol space because you aren't beholden to traditional methods. You can do whatever you want. So there's a ton of creativity, a ton of really interesting producers trying to do really cool things. So the education, there's definitely an aspect of education just around the product and what it is, but also how much is out there and how engaging it can be. So I think that's definitely a big part of our communication message.
Sure. Do you find your customers and people that are looking on your online e-commerce site, do they care about how it's made, and do they want to know the details and know the innovation element to these products?
We do explore that in a lot of our blogs, but it's not a huge. We don't see a huge interaction on those sites. For some people, it's really important, and it's really cool. I think we have it there. I'd like to make it more of a forefront, especially as we're exploring some of these wines, and I think we can do a better job with that. And maybe what I'd love to see us, and we're starting to evolve this, is more interaction with the producers on our site. I think of Paolo Paffi, who's created Casa Emma, our Sangiovese Zero from Casa Emma. This is beautiful winery in the Chianti Classico region. Their traditional wines have been ranked in the top 100 wines in the world. He's so passionate about what he's producing, and not from his non-alcoholic wines, because he talks about the passion of first creating the wine, like he as passionate as about every other wine, and then it goes into a dealcoholization process. It's no way a less than process. It's a more than process, and he's so incredibly passionate about it. And I can translate that to you, but there's nothing like actually seeing a video of Paolo in front of his vineyard talking with passion about that product that he's producing. And I'm just going to jump back a little bit to the education aspect. Is one of the challenges that we've created for ourselves is talking about these products in a negative manner. So we talk about alcohol free mocktails. We coach this entire industry in less than terms, but it's not. It's more than. Every process is a more than process, and the product is a more than product, which is, I think, part of our education. And this goes directly to the consumers, but also internally with the industry, is really what language can we use? What narrative can we develop to really celebrate that this is a more than product? This is a better than product. And that's a really big part of the messaging at Better Rhodes.
And it should be priced as such. We're doing more work to make these beverages, which I think is huge for consumers to understand, because then it makes sense why it's not a $5 bottle drink half the time. So that makes a lot of sense.
So I was Taylor, I'd love because you've seen this evolve from not just from within the non-alcohol industry, but from the outside looking in from the alcohol industry. How have you seen from the alcohol perspective the mindset changing around non-alc, if it has at all?
Yeah, I definitely think first, I just agree with your whole point. I meant to say I agree, but I think in my mind it just said disagree, but I agree entirely with Dan around the importance of education. I mean, even taking a step back, it's like, what do you mean I'm drinking a fake mezcal? Like, there just isn't, people don't necessarily understand, even in the traditional alcohol space, sometimes, like what a peaty scotch is versus a whiskey versus a bourbon. These things have been around forever, like, let alone what a de-alkalized wine or a fake mezcal tastes like. People don't even know what mezcal is yet in some parts of the country. So it's an added layer of importance, in my opinion, when it comes to education, because we all live fairly metropolitan lives, but I can tell you firsthand that even just the basic understanding of traditional beverage is not there yet, and how to drink things and when to drink them, what's the occasion. So when you have products on this side of things, which things are changing, as we said before, on literally an hourly basis, first and foremost is just how it fits into your life, or how to, what it tastes like, or just general education, I think, for what we're doing with Better Rhodes is going to continue to be paramount. But I think, and Dan, I'm curious if you agree, like, from a brand perspective, I am always a huge proponent of, like, stop talking about the water in the river that you got the water for the vodka. I mean, people want to know, like you asked, like, where things are made, who's behind these brands, but most importantly, like, what is it and how do I consume it, and what is the occasion set? And so regardless of whether I'm advising non-alcoholic brands or traditional beverage brands, it's like, focus on education, because at the end of the day, if you can educate and empower consumers on something, even if it doesn't pertain to you, they will remember you and become, hopefully, more often than not, a brand loyalist or a devotee of the brand, because you're not only educating them on your product, but you're educating them on the entire category. So that's the first thought on my mind. And then in terms of how, Chris, Dan, were you asking about, like, how beverage companies are viewing, like, traditional beverage companies are viewing this space?
Yeah, I think from the alcohol industry perspective, it was, it'd be interesting to understand where they think non-alc, if it's something even worth thinking about, or if it's still just kind of something that gets ignored.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah, I just want to make sure. Definitely not ignored at this point, though. I do think that like the general consensus, like it was when I was working more day to day in cannabis, is like sit and wait. Um, I I don't think the larger conglomerates everywhere I came from, most of them are based out of Italy or France. I mean, they're not rushing to make a fake margarita. You know, it's just not going to happen. What I have seen and what I'll continue to see, I feel, is investments into pre existing brands in the space as trial, as
Mm.
pilots. You know, you have a company like Diageo, who is the largest wine and spirit supplier in the world, and they were the first to really, quite frankly, like invest in literally metaphorically the space. I mean, they invested in Seedlip, which was started by a guy named Ben. And that is, from a general visibility perspective, one of the most visible non-alcoholic brands out there, because they had the backing, financial backing, but also just the counsel of the biggest beverage company, right? So you could see them on menus. You see a lot of people listening may have seen something called like a seed flip cocktail on drink menus across the country, whatever. And they're starting to. I do a lot of work with fundraising and you know, working in the investment community, as Dan knows, but a lot of investors are very interested in this space. So I think, to answer your question, I think that they definitely are taking it more seriously. Are they rushing to develop their own iterations of these products? Probably not. But we're already starting to see and have seen some strategic capital investments into these brands, as I see a way as like an initial entry point to see like what are the sales, what is the engagement, what is the feedback, what's working, what doesn't, and then either just double down on their investments or actually create separate entities or wings devoted to, like they would R&D and development of regular products into this, depending on how this all goes.
And do you think, Taylor, there is a metric that they are waiting for, an annual sales volume or profitability metric that as soon as we hit that, they're ready to go?
No, I mean, these companies are, I mean, they're still like, when you ask about, are you investing in anything with cannabis? They're like, we're still considering. I'm like, you've been considering this for 10 years. This isn't moving anywhere. So no, that's a very good question. I wish there was some metric where all of a sudden, you know, I mean, you know, what it could happen is over time, if not only, I think sales matter. So just general sales, I think they're obviously continuing to skyrocket. I think the question becomes like, and you've seen these articles, both of you, but like, is this going to die down? Like, obviously everyone is drinking the Kool-Aid now. Like, is this going to be the case in a year or two? So I think sustained momentum, both in terms of like sales, traction, menu placement, distribution, e-com sales, all of it. I think it has to be pretty holistically, continually moving in the steady right direction, at least for like year over year for the next year or two. And then once one big player does it, then it's the floodgates are open.
Yeah.
Then there'll probably be more. And this is just my humble opinion, but I think it's going to be at least a year or two for, you know, like a big conglomerate. Let's just leave it at that. Not like a distilling house, but a big conglomerate to come out with something on their own accord that they've developed. Yeah. And then after that point, if and when there is some big player that says, look, we've developed a whole series of non-alcoholic products, yeah, then it's a race from there. I don't think they'll all continue with those efforts if a lot of them start creating their own products, but I think there'll be a few contenders within some of those bigger houses that maybe they do have a few products that stick. And if they can get sales and they have a customer base and they retain that base, then they'll keep at it, in my opinion. I don't know, Dan, what you think, but those are just my predictions.
Well, I think we've seen the beer industry, right? We've seen Heineken enter, we've seen Guinness enter. What's interesting is where the, you know, beers had a great, you know, craft following, and you know, a lot of that can be attributed to Blue Moon. I'm thinking in the United States specifically, that focus, we saw major producers kind of coming into the market. If we look at the Super Bowl, not last year, which was all about Bitcoin, but the year before, it was all the ads, or majority of the ads were actually about non-alcoholic products. So I think what we've seen, at least for us, is that our customers tend to want to have that craft product. And beers that do best for us are the craft style beers. We carried a number of brand name, large kind of nationally international brands on the site, and they actually just didn't sell well. Not to the extent that we do with let's say a Big Drop or Sober Carpenter. Customers are looking for craft brew products, and I hope that continues. I hope that customers will continue to look for great quality craft produced products from these incredibly passionate producers. But I think to Taylor's point, there is going to be a lot of froth in the industry. There is right now. A lot of people are rushing in. A lot of not just from a producer perspective, but from a retail perspective, from an online perspective. There's a massive rush, and we've seen this in Europe. There'll probably be some consolidation, and then as the industry starts to find its footing. So, as we look at that, it's going to be interesting to see where the industry settles and really starts to where it starts to grow from.
Sure. Oh, very interesting. So do you think those are your consumers that are looking for the craft premiumization, or it's non-alc consumers in general, or do you know?
I think it speaks specifically to our consumers, because if you go into a grocery channel, you're going to see Heineken Zero, and that's what gets promoted. That's what's in the aisles, and it's just a lot harder for smaller producers to get that kind of placement. But online, in many ways, everyone's equal. Everyone has equal shelf space. So we've seen our consumers trend towards craft product, and it's because the product's great. Athletic Brewing has showed that. Even though now you can probably consider them a major brewer, one of the largest brewers in the country now. But we see that with Big Job. We see that with all the beers that we carry. They're just really good craft-made beers, but passionate producers, which is what we want to celebrate and what we want to build our community around, and what we want to educate people on. Heineken doesn't need my help. Guinness doesn't need my help, and nor can I add a ton of value. But there's a lot of other great producers where we feel we can really help getting their message and their product out to consumers.
That's great. So I have a question for both of you. I hear all the time, and I would say this more applies to wine probably than the beer and spirits, but I hear two complaints all the time, and they are complete opposites of each other. One, someone is unhappy about the price of non-alcoholic products, and they think it's expensive. And then 5 minutes later, I hear that the products aren't as quality as they're looking for, right? The quality isn't there. It doesn't taste exactly like wine or something like that. So in my mind, does that mean we're hitting the middle of the road, and some people want it more premium, some people want it less, but they don't want it where it's at? Or do you think that there's room to expand into these different categories? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a great question, and one that we get quite a bit as well. I think we all know that you can create a big, bold flavor with pretty cheap ingredients just by adding sugar, and alcohol is a great flavor transporter, and that works. Well, when you de-alcoholize something, you give up a lot of those flavor transporters in the alcohol. So it's not as easy to create those big, bold tastes. That if people consider that as what a good wine tastes like, well, I'm sorry, you're just not going to find that in a non-alcoholic product. But if to me, it's kind of Coke, Diet Coke. I remember the first time I drank a Diet Coke, I spat it out. Like, it was awful. It tasted like the tin. It tasted like water. It tasted like salt. It didn't taste at all like Coke. But now if I drink a regular Coke, I can actually feel it the sugar coating my teeth. I can't do this. So I think to really appreciate a great non-alcoholic wine, it's a little more nuanced. You do have to work a little harder to really appreciate all the different layers on your palate. and I think what we're seeing is producers starting to experiment as well with other ways to create some of that depth of flavor and beyond their traditional winemaking process. So there's a couple things I feel that are going on. And to go back to why is it so expensive, and that goes to that narrative around it's a less than product. Well, it has less alcohol, so it should be cheaper. Well, alcohol happens naturally. That's like the red on an apple. Taking it off is the hard part. I think it's again, it's an education. It's getting people to try the product, getting people to understand the product. I think when we use traditional nomenclature around products, you have a set understanding of what a Syrah is supposed to taste like. So if a de-alkalized Syrah is not going to taste the same, you've taken the alcohol out of it, but it's still going to taste. It's going to taste different, but it's going to be a complex adult beverage that tastes different than you may be used to. But it's still a great, positive, powerful taste. And you have to, and to get there, to get to that complexity, you need really good ingredients, and that's definitely part of the challenge. Expensive ingredients, a more expensive product, and often over shorter run lines. Making great non-alcoholic wine is quite expensive.
Do you think there's room for that premiumization and room to have both players, to have even for brands to have a few different product lines, some that are more affordable and approachable, and then some that maybe do hit that $50, $60, $80 bottle range? I mean, that's very common in the wine industry, but no one is doing that yet here.
I'd love to see that. And so I think, Drinkero is an interesting example where the majority of their sales are from the Free brand, which you'll find in every grocery store and every grocery channel. But for us, it's the opposite. Their Luminara, which is a Napa Valley product from Napa Valley, a Napa Valley Red, is our top, one of our top selling products, our top selling product in that category. And it has a transaction price, I think after shipping, close to $30. So no one's doing this to save money. It's just like you don't buy a Beyond Meat burger to save money. It's about health and wellness. And our customer is willing to spend that money if you give them a good quality product. And Luminar has created a great quality product. It's different than their entry level. And I think we will continue to see that. We'll see entry level products. But we feel that, or for us, our sales definitely tend towards the premium level, especially if you look at the traditional wine category. But yeah, our wines are definitely premium level. That's where our customers tend to go.
So Taylor, I know that you have been actually hired by alcoholic companies to destigmatize some of the brand ethos that they, for whatever reason, had gotten themselves into, they weren't happy with. We've always obviously talked a lot about what the stigma is for non-alc and the lower quality and all of that, but how, I would love to know, how do you think we can further destigmatize that and really elevate the category and the consumer impression of the category?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I mean, like, I think it's more like on the non-alc side, my opinion is like, it's less destigma, for the beverage space, yeah, to go there for a second. So yeah, I was brought into companies like Boston Beer to change perception from like a brand that was kind of the originators of craft to like, they became a mass brand. Now they want to be back to craft. Or I worked for Jägermeister and Patron Tequila, which did have different associations and trying to shift perception. And maybe that's a better way of, and I told you the word destigmatize, but I'm thinking out loud of like, maybe it's just shifting perception. And that's always been something that I love to figure out, is like how to shift perception of like a shot brand. You have Cinco de Mayo timeframe to like a sippable year-round product that's more mature than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was vice president of one of the largest privately owned cannabis companies as well, up until recently, while doing my own business. And that was another industry of shifting perception. Like, it's not just a vice industry. It actually has I'm not saying everything is health benefits, but there are benefits to a lot of different people that use cannabis products, right? And I think with non-alc, the point around the pricing is really interesting. I don't sit where Dan sits, but like I think it goes back to education, educating them, Dan, right? Like not only on like when to drink it and how it fits in your life, but like I think the education on pricing is really important because you're right, Kayla. Like I'll pick up a bottle of non-alcoholic mezcal and it's literally $45. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I know the space better than most. I'm willing to do that because I like the category. I want to support these businesses. But as a general consumer who's just getting into this category, who wants to like explore not drinking as much, buying a $50 bottle of fake whiskey, I don't think so unless they're educated on like even just putting like a hang tag. I'm just thinking out loud, but like if you're at like a bottle store, like a Spirited Away or something like that, right? And you see one of these products, Better Roads can help educate, but if you're in a store, let's say, or Wegmans or whatever, there should be a hang tag on like, this is how this product is made, or this is why, just get general insights like around pricing. Like I know a company called Midday Squares and they're Canadian based and they're like the darling chocolate company right now. And there are 3 kids and they were approached by Hershey's to be sold to Hershey's and they said no. And they're kind of on their own, like trying to get to an IPO. It's a very cool story. But anyway, they had to increase their prices quite considerably and shift the packaging from like 2 squares to 1 chocolate bar, and everything was documented. They did an infographic of the people creating the cocoa beans, transporting it to the production facility, and it was just genius. And they did it in a way to mitigate like questions, but also to explain and educate people on not only their product, but how the financial landscape is impacting and supply chain and everything like that. So even if some of these brands didn't have to go that far down the road, that they could at least just give like on a hang tag, we create this product with care and love, and this is the process how it's made, and this is why it costs so much, I think would be a good first step outside of what, like Better Roads would do in terms of educating them on their platform. And then lastly is just in terms of shifting perception. I think, again, going back to like shift the perception. Like it is not weird not to drink. It should be weirder if you need to drink at every single occasion, every night. So that is going to take a lot of time. Yeah. But as said, going back to having more options and having it become more available, a la a Better Rhodes, a la in store on cocktail menus, over time, I think that perception will change.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I feel like the category, from everything I've seen, it's very much consumer led in the sense that there weren't just a bunch of brands that got together and said, let's just make non-alc a thing. It's the health and wellness movement. It's people wanting better products and better experiences, more mindfulness. However, they're still, the consumers almost started it, and I feel like we kind of have to finish it. We have to get them past that threshold where, okay, you're telling us what you want, we're giving it to you, but now we have to explain why it has to be at this price point and at these, certain occasions, I guess. Does that kind of summarize what you're thinking, or am I far off?
I think what we're seeing is what's interesting is we have really strong parallels, right? We've seen what's happened in the plant-based world. We've seen what's happened with alternative milks. So we've seen perceptions change, and we want it, obviously, as we're kind of at the forefront of this industry, we want it to happen faster. Mm-hmm. But it is a process, and yeah, we have to educate on every level. We have to educate on why things are more expensive, on why this is a healthier product for you. And it's in why this is not about being anti-alcohol, but being about pro-empowerment and about community and conviviality, that this is about feeling comfortable in your own skin but being able to celebrate and, getting people to think about, over Thanksgiving, I can't serve a Vicuco on one end and a bottle of ginger ale on the other. There's, it's about celebrating not just your decisions, but celebrating the decisions of other people at your table. And we know that 25% of those people are choosing not to drink. And if you actually offered them great alternatives, that number goes higher. It's close to 30, 35% if you gave them great alternatives for a great non-alcoholic beverage. So it's really about getting people to understand, getting hosts, and maybe it isn't, maybe the first contact shouldn't be, or first push shouldn't be in restaurants. Maybe it's individuals at their homes. And then if you have a party, just like, 20 years ago, if someone came and said they were a vegan, you'd be like, oh, like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I feed them? Right. But now if you go to if you have a party, if you're hosting an event and you don't have a plant-based option, you're just a bad host. That's what it is now, right? You're just being a bad host. So, that's where I would love to see us go is, and maybe it is, but maybe it is still consumer led, but from a hosting perspective.
I feel personally attacked. I
Uh-oh.
need to now think I don't host often, but when I do, I don't have, man, all right.
You need these options, Kayla. You need these options.
Invite me over. I lived through that. Absolutely. Being where it was almost like I was the rude one for not eating the meat that the host was serving. And that has totally changed. Now it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't have enough options, or I only have 5 things you can eat instead of 10 like everyone else. I feel so bad, like that has totally changed. So I can see how that's a good parallel to make.
And I think what's great about that is that's consumer led. And as you said, it is consumer led here. I think more so than maybe in the UK, where the pub environment still plays a great way of drawing and influencing the way people eat and drink. And here it just seems to be more consumer led, where the kind of the retail environment follows. Like if enough people ask, then maybe I'll have it. So but that to me is a big evolution of our attitude. And as Taylor was saying, is we're shifting perceptions. And maybe it is destigmatizing, like you said. It's why before, if I ask for a non-alcoholic beverage, do I feel guilty just for imposing, or do I just go grab a La Croix out of the fridge, or go grab a ginger ale? But now it's ideally a host will look around the environment and say, is every single one of my guests being celebrated? And if someone's drinking this beautiful glass of champagne here, but a ginger ale here, it's like, okay, well, did I give them enough choices? So I think that's ideally that's where we get to. It's a long way to go. It takes a lot of education, a lot of commitment. And that's not just from us, but from the producers as well. And we, at the end of the day, we're storytellers. We're always going to be storytellers. And to Sloan's point, there's only so much you can tell with the label on your bottle, but what are other things that we can do, from QR codes to hang tags to things like that.
Definitely. All right. Education. I think it's where we have been. It's where we are. It's where we still need to go. That would be, I think, the big takeaway. Well, thank you guys so much for another episode. It was great talking to you. For all of our listeners, thank you. We are going to be doing our 3rd and final episode of this series next week. So stay tuned. But otherwise, thanks for listening. Happy Sober October.
Bye, everybody.